Hi, everybody. I'm excited. Today, I'm at the city of Denver, and this is Britta, and she is the Chief Housing Officer. That's such a cool title. Can you tell me about homelessness in Denver?
Yeah, here in the city of Denver, we're a welcoming and inclusive city and pleased to have all sorts of folks in our community. And we know that sometimes people fall into an experience of homelessness and that they really need to be helped and supported in our community here in Denver. Right now, if you look at the numbers in our 2018 point in time study, there were 3,445 people experiencing homelessness on that one night in January. When we look at that in the context of Denver overall, we've seen explosive growth in our community. And at the same time, if you look at that point in time data in 2012, it was over 5,000 individuals. So we've actually had a 35% decrease in the point in time numbers. But at the same time, we've had an increase in what I would say is the more visible homelessness
Street
that
homelessness.
we're seeing people on the street, the unsheltered population. And so those two things are both true and create an interesting conversation around homelessness in our community right now.
And it's challenging because people view the community by the street homelessness that they see. So even you could have great impact in housing people, and when they see more street homelessness, they just judge that as, oh my gosh, what's going on?
You're so right. I think one of the things that I'd really love to draw attention to is that work we've done really to reduce homelessness at the beginning, the prevention, as some people might say, or rapid resolutions, that we're stabilizing people in place. Those are really low-cost, high-impact investments that help people avoid eviction, help them overcome utility bills and increases in rent that otherwise might displace them. And so we think that's really important of what we're doing here is that housing stability work. And at the same time, if we look at that street homelessness, we saw as a country about 40 years ago a tremendous increase overall in that visible homelessness. And that's pretty directly tied to a change in our federal policies about how we're supporting people who are experiencing crisis in their life, and as well as people who are in poverty. And so we've seen this real federal abandonment of funding sources for supporting people who are most in need.
If you are not aware, back in the 80s, the federal government just destroyed funding. I call it destroyed. Destroyed funding for affordable housing, which is why we're seeing the increase in homelessness today. It really can be tied directly to the lack of affordable housing, and that can be tied to the 80s funding being cut.
I think you're very right on that, Mark. I talk not only about the housing number, which Enterprise Communities has said is really $75 billion in lost funding over the last 40 years, based on that 1980s change. And it's also those poverty supports as well. So when we look at wage stagnation, we look at the housing markets, and then we look at the federal abandonment or destruction of some of that housing funding, it's created a stew that makes it very hard for us to support people that are most in need. And that means we have to do more. And that's what we're doing here in Denver.
I was going to do this at the end, but it just feels right. We need your voice. You guys need to go to invisiblepeople.tv/get involved. There's also a link down below. And we make it easy for you to tweet, Facebook, email, or call your state and federal legislators. We need you to take action because if we do not fix the affordable housing crisis, it's going to be really scary. And as a taxpayer, you pay for homelessness. So it's in your benefit to make affordable housing a priority.
Not only that, we speak loudly through budgets, and right now our federal housing policy largely benefits those of us who are homeowners. which I happen to be in that category. And that mortgage subsidy that I enjoy and others, that's 80% of our federal dollars in housing. And that seems disproportionate to the need that we see
Right.
both on our streets and for those who are doubling up and in crisis and vulnerably and precariously housed in our community, to see so much going for those of us who enjoy a lot of stability already versus those who are very desperate for that housing stability.
So tell me, what programs are working? What are you doing? Could you give me what's happening now and where you're going in homeless services and housing?
Sure. Excited to talk about that. First of all, this is a U.S. mayors and CEOs campaign, and I am very privileged to work for Mayor Michael B. Hancock, who's a great leader on this issue and speaks from his voice as a person who has experienced homelessness. He has a powerful story of what his family went through and then got into public housing and how much that stabilized them, helped his educational attainment, and really set him on a great trajectory in life. Not only that, he's actually worked as a houser.
Oh, wow.
He's worked for the Denver Housing Authority. And so it's a pretty great privilege as a chief housing officer to work for a mayor who, one, knows housing and speaks authentically from the voice of somebody who's had that experience.
You have a boss that gets it.
I do, and that is a pretty valuable thing.
Yeah.
So I really applaud all the mayors who are coming together to give voice to their constituents and to this issue.
Yeah.
To get back to more of your question as to what's working here in Denver, we have seen a lot of that support for the housing stability. So we were talking earlier about how it is a low cost but high impact investment to help stabilize someone where they are. So if somebody is precariously housed or vulnerable to displacement, we want to support them right there to either keep them in place or restore them to place. And those kinds of activities are really important.
Prevention's so
That-
important.
Yeah, it's really hard to drain the tub if we keep pouring into it,
Yeah.
to use a pretty crude
No, I
metaphor.
get it. I
but
get it.
we have to do both. We have to serve the people who are currently experiencing homelessness, but we also have to reduce those preventable experiences as well.
And while we're closing the back door, we have to close the front door.
There's another one. That's a great one. So I think some of our programs that are working are temporary rental and utility assistance. It's really helping people get through something short term. One of our clients, Monica, she had a brain aneurysm. And so she and her boys were at risk of being evicted if they weren't able to pay their rent. They had enough savings for 1 month, but she needed surgery and recovery time for at least a couple months. So we actually only paid for 1 month for this family to stay in that home with their rent, and then they were stabilized versus the cost of, let's say an apartment door costs about $300,000
Right,
in
right.
Denver to build. I mean,
Right.
a few $1,000s for rent versus the whole cost of a unit. That really tells you how important that stabilization is.
Or when the family hits the shelter, what it does to the family as far as trauma. And I mean, there's so much value in preventing homelessness.
For sure. We want to promote stabilization. We want to prevent trauma. And we know that people do better when they are healthy, housed, and connected. And
Yeah.
that is what our mayor speaks to. And that's what I speak to, is that we want people to be their best selves. We know that foundational success is really in being stably housed. The second thing that I would say is, funding. We talked about quite a bit on the nationwide level. We continue to use the federal supports that are available, but those have been diminishing over time. So we have, here in Denver, created dedicated local funds. We have an affordable housing fund that's over $30 million a year. And it's not everything, but it is a huge step that helps our community leverage and reach some of the potential that we have to build affordable housing, to provide supportive services, and to reach people in our community.
Well, great. What's a challenge? What's driving you crazy, keeping you up at night, that this wall you have to jump over?
Yeah, I would continue to point to those federal resources. Our communities work best when we help one another,
Yeah.
and that's something that we speak to here in Denver a lot, that we are welcoming of immigrants, that we are welcoming of all people, of all types and identities. And so I would challenge us not only to look at our funding, but also our policies and our rules and regulations to make sure we're reflecting that value
Yeah.
as a nation, that we are not discriminating or withholding benefits from people because of any type of identification that they may have.
Yeah. How can the people of Denver support ending homelessness in the work that the city is doing?
Yeah, I would go back to the fact that this is a community-wide issue, and we need community-wide response. This is not something that we as the city of Denver alone can solve. This is something that we can all work together to solve every day. The first thing that I would ask anybody to do is be a friend, be a family member. Notice when people are going through tough times and figure out how we can support them and connect them early so that they don't fall to a spot where they're in such crisis that they are displaced from housing and not connected. When people are not connected to those support networks, it's so difficult. So help your own friends and family as well, and then figure out how you can do that in your community. We have so many service providers, partners, vendors that provide services of caring in our community, but they need help, they need support, and they need dollars. We need that in order to help people in crisis. So I would ask everybody to do that. And then finally is to show up to your elected representatives. You know, we're fortunate with our mayor to have that. Our city council is leading on this issue, but we need to keep showing up and saying, yes, we want housing in our community for everyone. That we do want all folks to be part of our communities and our neighborhoods so that we can locate services and housing supports for those times that many people go through times in life where they're going to have a hard time. We've got to be able to provide that support and make sure that we're not falling to those most costly and acute resources where people are so traumatized. Let's do more to help people now.
One of the things that I've been seeing that's really just brilliant is I have been seeing, for lack of a better term, community action groups where neighborhoods are, going out and helping and getting involved, not just with their homeless neighbors, but with service providers. Because I think it's so important, if you're feeding somebody in a park, you have to get them out of the park. You just can't leave them there. A lot of times people say, well, I'm their buddy. Well, if you're their buddy, you'll help them get housing. It's really that simple. We've talked a bit about the federal government already. We've set it up. I'm just going to remind you, please go to invisiblepeople.tv/get involved. We make it easy for you to contact your state and federal legislators. Please send a link to all your friends. Your voice is important. We need you to advocate for more affordable housing. Well, thank you for letting me spend a little time with you today.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, thank you, and thank everybody for watching.